All right, thanks for tuning in, everybody. This episode, we are taking a journey across the northern border again. And if you have been a listener of this show for any length of time, you know that we have mentioned this particular movie. And when I say we've mentioned this particular movie, I'm going to point Mark out on this one because Mark has mentioned this particular movie probably 8,000 times in the various episodes over the years. I believe that this movie gets mentioned almost as much as John Carpenter references. And
that's too funny. I have so many John Carpenter references for this movie. Too, so this is perfect.
And we are talking about a 1987 Canadian horror film that was directed by Bruce Pittman, and it starred Michael Ironside, Wendy Lyon, Louis Ferreira, and Lisa Schrag. I could have just left those last two names out, I guess. But we are talking about the one and the only Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2.
This is the episode everybody has been waiting for. This is the one. This is the culmination of everything we've talked about. It comes down to Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. You agree with me on this, right? This is like, kind of like that point in podcast history where, at least especially with this show, where, we're coming to this place where this is, I don't know, this is a make it or break it place. This is one of those films that we've been wanting to get to for so long. And I'll go beyond just this podcast, because this is a film you and I have been watching religiously since, the 4th or 5th grade. And it became like such a staple in our horror viewing. And then it disappeared, for years and years and years. And then, the last time we saw it, the last time I saw this film was with you when we first got together, when we started, doing our horror fest together, where we'd get together at each other's house and watch horror movies. And the sad thing about it, though, is, that particular evening, we had so much beer flowing that I don't remember the film.
I would have to second that as well.
Didn't we do Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D that night, too?
We could have, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, because you bought the DVD with glasses.
I believe we did Friday the 13th Part 3. We did Hello, Mary Lou, and then I think we also did Destruction Kings as well.
Yeah, that was the one you had in there. And then I think we did My Bloody Valentine as well, the original. I don't know how far we got into it, but because I brought Moosehead beer.
Oh, okay.
But anyhow, yeah.
That was a long time ago, dude. I don't remember.
It was. Going back, though, this is another Canadian horror film, which, you know us here at Horrorheads. The Canadian horror is, probably on the list of some of the best horror films ever made, like My Bloody Valentine, like we just mentioned, Curtains, this one, Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. I mean, there's a whole lot of them out there and I hope you grab some. We should have grabbed some Canadian beer for this one. I don't know what we were thinking.
Oh, now that you mentioned that, that would have been a good idea.
But this is a classic film. This is one of those late 80s constant cable films. Like, it was always on cable. It was, no matter what, you couldn't miss this one. It was, if you had a TV back then and cable, I mean, it was there. It was always on. I recorded it on VHS. I would so wish I could find my copy of it, because it'd probably have some pretty cool commercials to go through. And, this is one of those films where, you would come over, we'd walk home from school, and we'd toss in Mary Lou, and it was just like, Mary Lou and the Friday the 13th movie and Creep Show and, whatever else we had at the time. But, yeah, Mary Lou was one of those films, too, that, nobody was really talking about. It wasn't like Freddy or Jason or anything like that. Nobody mentioned this one. And so it was kind of like this underground film at least for us, and not too many people knew about it.
It was, and what's funny is we watched this, like you had said, however many years ago that was, 10 years ago, which was like the last time that I had seen it. And I remember I actually bought it on DVD, like right before or right around that time, because we watched it on DVD at my house.
Right.
And then I had recently picked it up on VHS, and that's when I finally picked it up on VHS, I was like, okay, dude, so I acquired this on tape, so I guess that's a sign that it's actually finally time to do the show on it. And I am going to be completely honest with you. When I watched this the other day, I had zero recollection of this movie. Like, almost everything that happened in this movie, I did not remember at all.
You don't remember any of it?
And it got over, and then I almost texted you. Like, I think I had it typed out, and I deleted it. And I almost texted you and said, are you sure that we actually watched this when we were kids? We weren't watching something else? Because I swear I have... It was like watching the movie for the first time, like, and maybe it was just because it's been so long since I've seen it, and like you said, I think the last time we attempted to watch it, I think by the time we got to Hello, Mary Lou, I think it was the last movie on the list, and we were probably both a good case into it or whatever. And
oh, yeah. Deep into the moose head by then.
Oh, man, and I'm sure we didn't remember anything the next day, so I was watching this and I was like, man, I have no recollection of this movie at all.
Oh man,
which was actually kind of cool because I remember when we watched it the last time we watched it on DVD, I was like, the only thing I remember about that was the next day. I remember thinking, why the hell did we watch that all the time when we were kids? That was stupid.
And then you tried to pawn off the DVD to me.
I did. I do. I remember that. And you were like, because you were like, I don't want that.
Well, I think it was like in my mind, I was thinking, you know what? I felt you needed this copy because this was a classic film in our history, and I didn't want to take it because I felt like it was important that you had this copy, and I was going to need to find my own. And actually, I did eventually get the VHS too. That was actually one of our trips to Volo, probably the first trip. I picked it up, I grabbed it, and I have the VHS copy. I was going to watch it on VHS yesterday, right after work, but it turned out that, well, I didn't want to. I looked for the VHS or the VCR, and I couldn't find it, and I figured, what the hell, I'll just watch it on Prime. And thankfully, the Prime presentation was as if they ripped it straight from the VHS because it wasn't a full screen. It was letterbox or whatever they call that. And, well, I guess it would technically be full screen for a box TV. So I got to experience it the way I saw it back in the day, which was kind of cool.
I would like to think that you hit the play button on Prime and some guy sitting at some Amazon, server room was like, oh, somebody's trying to watch Hello, Mary Lou. Hold on, I got to go get the tape real quick. Let me throw it in the player.
Oh, too fun. And it's kind of funny because we had talked about like these films that or these Blu-rays they have out now, like you go to Walmart or whatever and pick them up, and the cover art, they make them look like they're a VHS box, like all worn out looking, and with like the little, rating sticker on it and like the genre sticker, it'll say horror or whatever, and it looks like they have a picture of like a VHS tape sliding out of it. And I'm thinking like, I wonder if those Blu-rays are all like this, like where you're like watching them in a box like this.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
That'd be pretty funny. But yeah, so where do you want to start? Do you want to give kind of the synopsis of this film, or?
Well, I think the first thing I do want to point out is, because this movie is one of those ones that has always had the stigma of being a sequel to a movie that it has absolutely nothing to do with. Kind of falls in the same category as Halloween 3, really. And I do want to say that this movie originally was supposed to be a standalone movie, and then because Prom Night actually was a success, somebody, I don't know who, but somebody got a hold of it and went, oh, you know what? let's go ahead and just call it Hello, Mary Lou Prom Night 2. Because that is one thing you'll notice with this. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Jamie Lee Curtis Prom Night.
Yeah, and we did Prom Night, so if you want to look back in a few episodes back, and it's there if you want to check that out. And I was a pretty big fan of the original Prom Night back in like the late 80s or whatnot. As a kid, I was a big slasher fan, and after Halloween, I tried to kind of soak up all the slashers I could find. And, the original Prom Night is a straight-up slasher movie. It's basically, like the standard follow-up to all the horror that came after Halloween. It was just a, paint-by-numbers film about, okay, here's a guy, he goes around killing people, and it's Prom Night. Same thing like with Friday the 13th, Halloween, My Bloody Valentine, there's some kind of event or day or whatever. There's two things I wanted to discuss. But since you mentioned it, I'll bring it up now, I guess. So you mentioned that this was a lot like Halloween 3, where it's like a sequel in title only. It has nothing to do with the original, and you're right. Absolutely nothing at all whatsoever. It's a whole lot different type of storyline. Has nothing to do with the original film. And I was thinking for a second, because there are 4 Prom Night movies, and I haven't seen part 3 or part 4. I may have seen part 3 and I just don't remember it. And I was thinking, like, when I was reviewing this, I had this weird epiphany, like, you know what? And this is where, like, how this all, we say everything connects back to John Carpenter. Well, it kind of already did when we talked about Halloween 3. But anyhow, I had this weird epiphany that the Prom Night franchise really became what John Carpenter wanted the Halloween franchise to be, where it would be like sort of this anthology film series, just using the theme of Prom Night for each movie. And I was like, really like, oh, this is so cool. This is what it is. And then I was going through the Wikipedia page, and apparently the Mary Lou Maloney character did appear in Prom Night 3. So that would kind of, screw up that theory. Unless part 4, it has nothing to do with the rest of them. But I thought that was kind of neat. That this might have been the first anthology films franchise like this, but may not have been.
Yeah, we'll have to, when we get our own film company, that's what we should just do, is start up our own anthology and be like, damn it, we're going to finally do it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, so I was thinking that this might be that, but apparently it looks like part 3 had that character in it, maybe to a different level probably, and then there's a part 4, and I don't know anything about that. So, but anyhow, this was one of those films that you and I were like religiously watching all the time, and there were some surprises that I didn't recall from it. But basically the storyline is back in the 50s, there was this prom night, and Mary Lou Maloney was this kind of wild child type of, she always getting in trouble, drinking. She was a bad girl basically, and so she goes on this. It's prom night. She's out with her date, and then she ends up with this other guy, and her date sees them together in the back room, and she's basically like, "Well, screw you. It doesn't matter who you come with; it's who you leave with." And she goes off. She win, and then they do the competition of who's the prom queen, and she wins, and then her boyfriend, who's all butthurt about her leaving, basically decides to get even with her. So he climbs up on the catwalk above the stage, lights a stink bomb, drops it down, and hoping to just kind of make her feel like a fool while this smoke and whatnot created from the stink bomb is coming out. But anyhow, the wick of this thing ends up catching her on fire, her dress on fire, and she goes up in flames and dies this horrible death, which everybody in the crowd, including all the teachers and the adults, just sat and watched her burn to death, and nobody decided to like, hey, maybe we should grab like a blanket and like throw it over her while she's like burning and like twitching in sheer agony up on the stage. But yeah, nobody decided to do that. So she dies this horrible, hideous death in front of everybody, and then we flash forward to 1987, and we meet Vicky, who is kind of like the main girl in this film, and it's prom night's coming again and what have you. And it turns out Mary Lou's ex-boyfriend is now the principal of the school, and then the guy that she was cheating on ended up turning into the town priest at the local Catholic church. I think you all know what's going to happen. I mean, this is a horror movie, so prom night's coming, so somehow something's going to happen that all these characters are going to somehow meet, and well, basically Mary Lou is going to come and get her revenge.
Yeah, this movie is basically A Nightmare on Elm Street meets Carrie.
Oh man, you took my. Oh, I was going to say the exact same thing, with a little bit of The Exorcist sprinkled in for good measure.
Yeah, it is crazy and it's funny too because when I was watching, I was like, when you got to that particular scene, that prom scene at the beginning, I was like, oh, this is such a Carrie ripoff. And then I thought I was having this divine moment. I'm like, oh, I thought of something original for this. It even says it on the box of the VHS tape. Very reminiscent of Carrie. I'm like, really? You're even calling out on your own movie, like, hey, we ripped this movie off.
That's too funny. Yeah, it is very much it is Carrie mixed with A Nightmare on Elm Street. And also one thing I wanted to mention, the original prom, like I said, the original prom night was basically a follow up to Halloween. It was a slasher film, and it follows the basic slasher tropes that you would expect in a slasher film. Well, this one, Prom Night 2, this is post Nightmare on Elm Street. So it's basically you can see the Nightmare on Elm Street influence all over the place. This is a fantasy horror film. I mean, the one scene that to me was straight up right out of a Freddy movie was when the main character, when she gets sucked into the chalkboard, and the chalkboard's like a swimming pool or like liquid, and it's yeah, this is totally a Nightmare on Elm Street. That's where this is all coming from. And actually, this movie it's really like a Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 when Freddy possesses Jesse, because it's really about Mary Lou, who was burned to death. I mean, what's that sound like? And she comes back and she needs a body basically, so she possesses this teenage girl to come back and relive prom night basically. So it's really like a Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 mixed with Carrie, and then there's all these kind of weird religious overtones with the Catholic Church and the confessional and all that kind of really connect with you can see The Exorcist influence as well.
It's funny because I was just going through my notes here, and you said that earlier, but then I was looking through, and I have this Carrie ripoff, a Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff, and then I have this is what I have written down. It's basically Ripoff City. Holy crap, they're even ripping off The Exorcist.
Too funny. And then there's the scene with the Total Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff where she has this in her bedroom. She has a rocking horse. And as she becomes more possessed, the rocking horse, its face kind of morphs, and it has this long tongue that kind of sticks out. And I'm thinking to myself, that's totally Nancy's telephone when she picks up the phone and Freddy's tongue sticks out.
Wow,
totally
that horse was just weird.
It was weird. It was so weird. Let me ask you this. What'd you think of the full frontal?
That's all right.
Were you expecting that?
No, not at all. But I guess it's not surprising at all coming from a movie from the 80s, where even now, I mean, it just always anymore, or it always seems to be nudity is so unnecessary, but it just ends up in movies for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's funny with that that particular scene. I remember seeing that when we watched it at your house when you first bought the DVD, 10 years ago or whatever, and being what? And being completely shocked, because the version I was watching back in 5th and 6th grade was the edited for television version. So completely back then it was a big oh my gosh, I had no idea that this was going on. So this time around watching it again, I was aware that was going to happen, but the first time watching it again with you 10 years ago it was a big shocker.
Yeah, I just, like I said, man, there's nothing about this movie when I watched it that I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. Because I even, like, you know, when the priest ended up being the boyfriend or whatever, the principal or whatever, I was like, oh, I bet you I never knew that when I was a kid. I probably never picked up on that before.
What I remember specifically from as a kid, I remember the whole opening scene and everything with the back in the 50s with Mary Lou and you know, when she gets torched and what have you. I mean, I remembered all that. I remember the main character, and I remember some of the stuff with that. And then the finale with when Mary Lou comes out of, like, the main character is Mary Lou, and you know, at the end of the film, she wins the prom again, and the boyfriend, who is the principal, he gets up on the catwalk again, and this time he shoots her, and she falls down dead. But then Mary Lou comes out of her body, and it's that whole scene where Mary Lou is starting to come up from, you know, she's this like corpse basically, and then she starts to morph into her like more full self. I remember all of that. That was like the big scene. I remember actually that in like the TV spots, they always showed all that stuff. The one thing that did surprise me is I never remembered the conclusion, what the finale was. And the finale of this film was so funny. It was like, that is right out of A Nightmare on Elm Street. It was like, you couldn't make a more like copy of you know, I mean, I was surprised the dad didn't have a red sweater on with a glove. I mean, it was so like Nightmare on Elm Street. It was too funny.
Yeah, now I wonder if in Prom Night 3, what the actual storyline of that was, if it was an actual continuation or if it was just like one of those like, oh, here's a nod to...
Oh yeah, could it have just been like...
Yeah.
Like her name was used or whatever. And that could be. And if that's the case, then we do have our first official, at least that we're aware of, horror anthology franchise.
No, this seems like it's... Oh, okay. Yeah. The third film in the Prom Night franchise is continuing the storyline involving the murderous ghoul, Mary Lou Maloney.
Oh, bummer. Well, there you go. Well, it turned out like that whole Carpenter reference was for nothing.
The other movie that would have been really popular in this sort of same time frame back in the 80s would have been Back to the Future. Uh-huh. So I wonder if, like, when this movie was originally being written, you know, the whole 57 to present day and stuff, I wonder if there was any influence from, like, Back to the Future in that.
You know, that makes a lot of sense because it does, you know, the whole 50s thing. But I think that's interesting because, you know, it's funny because, like, when I think of the 80s, the 50s and the 80s have, like, a very similar vibe to them. That for whatever reason, it's almost like sort of like there's a parallel thing going on. And even when you watch movies from the 80s, they always kind of link back, and probably because the parents from the 80s were always, their childhood was the 50s. So, and I think too, like a lot of the Stephen King stuff, you know, like a lot of his stuff was always based in the 50s, like for the childhood parts, but then it would be modern day in the 80s. Stand By Me kind of comes to mind. And for whatever reason, those two decades had sort of like a lot in common. And I think too, like now you look at like the It movie, you know, where they've, instead of doing it in the 50s, they're doing it in the 80s. So currently, like with this new film that they're doing, and yeah, so it makes sense.
Weird.
But another thing I want to mention too is that, and I didn't look this up, so I have no idea if this is accurate or not, but listening to the soundtrack of this film, other than you know, it's funny because around the time of the probably 86, 87 and on, through the rest of the 80s, they always used like, especially in horror movies, they would use like a drum beat. You'd hear like, doo 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 doo, like that in the soundtrack. And they use that a lot in those later Friday the 13th movies. It's kind of funny to hear that. It's so dated. But they do that a lot in this. But not only do they have that, but they also have the soundtrack, which is kind of funny. It's that very similar horror, that Canadian horror soundtrack that we hear in a lot of other movies. Like, for example, if you compare the soundtrack to this to My Bloody Valentine, you can hear a whole lot of similarities. And I know that like there's a specific artist who's done a lot of these Canadian horror films, the soundtracks for them, and I would imagine it's the same guy because it really sounded a lot like that film. And you know what? I'm going to find out for sure in 1 second. Paul Zaza was the guy who did it. And he did it. Yes, I was right. He did My Bloody Valentine, the original Prom Night. He did Curtains. I was so right. Absolutely. Okay, yep, exactly. My theory is correct.
He must be like the go-to guy in Canada. They're like, hey, we need a horror score, eh?
Oh, too funny.
Call Paul there, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
Give me another beer, eh?
Oh, you know what else he did? He did A Christmas Story.
Oh,
the soundtrack for that.
I thought you were going to say Strange Brew. I would have been like, well, that'd be kind of fun.
No, he did A Christmas Story. He did the soundtrack for that, too.
Is Christmas Story, is that a Canadian-produced movie? I mean, I know it took place in America, and it was filmed here. But...
Right. Well, I'm checking now. Now I'm curious. It's like...
You know what's funny is, over the years that we've been doing this show, and I know that back in the 80s and stuff, and it might still be true, I'm not even sure. Back in the 80s, I know that there was like a big like tax incentive to go into Canada to shoot, even if you were making an American movie. You know, like Friday the 13th Part 8 comes to mind.
Oh, yeah.
For example, you know, that's a big one. But I never realized how many movies Canada actually produced. You know, especially horror movies. I mean, it's nuts. We've been doing this show for what? We're going into, is this our 5th year now? 4th year doing the show? 5th year?
Oh my gosh.
Oh man, it's been forever, it seems like. And I don't know how many Canadian movies we've covered. And we haven't done all horror. I mean, like we were just joking around about Strange Brew, and we did do an episode about Strange Brew. But man, the number of Canadian horror movies that is out there, it's insane.
Oh, yeah.
And they're still coming out.
You're right. Yeah, like a lot of the stuff we've done that are more modern has been Canadian as well.
It's crazy. You know, I do have to tell you, though, of any of the horror movies out there, the original cover art for Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2 is probably one of my favorite. And even to this day, like that image of that, you know, like that coffin-like image in the locker is just, it's just great. It just reminds me of childhood. Even though, like I said before, I don't remember watching this movie from when I was a kid, even though I know we saw it 1,000 times. I don't know why I blocked it out, but I just, you know, it just like left. But that image, like even to this day, I'm like, it almost gives me goosebumps. It's weird to say, but it's cool. Like, you know, it's like that image in particular just reminds me of 1987. You know, just that was then, and you know, it's kind of hot and sexy and just, you know, but kind of creepy at the same time. It's you know, it's just effective.
Yeah, I remember this cover art quite a bit. Like this is another one of those films that in the late 80s, it was every video store had it, all the mom and pops. It actually did a lot better in its video run than it did in its theatrical.
Right.
And it shows kind of the power of the video store back then, how these were films that you may not have been huge successes in the theater, but you know, people, you know, you go out on a Friday night, Saturday night to go get your movie like we all used to do back in the day. And it's like, you'd look around, spend about a half hour to an hour at the video store. And Yeah, Mary Lou, I'll grab that. The cover looks pretty cool. But yeah, you're right. It does have that total like late '80s vibe to it.
And the only other thing I will say about that goes back again to me for whatever weird reason. Totally didn't remember anything about this movie. When you see that cover, though, it's almost a little bit of false advertisement because you have this smoking hot brunette, with this bulging cleavage in this locker, and you start watching the movie, and then you have this gorgeous brunette at the very beginning of the movie for 2 minutes, and then you have this other person who looks like Carrie from Carrie the rest of the movie, and you're like, oh, where's the girl from the cover at?
Right.
And I think that was the part of the reason why I didn't. I don't know. It was just weird. But yeah, the cover's great.
There's so much we can say about this movie. We could probably do a whole other episode on it if we needed to. Maybe in the future we could. We could do a Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2, Part 2. Just to finish up all of our thoughts and all of our things. Because this is a classic film. And this is like you and I, especially when it comes to horror, the late 80s was sort of where it all culminated for us. That was when, we were talking about it all the time. And, we were going back to the classics like the late 70s stuff like the original Halloween or Texas Chainsaw and all of that. But the late 80s was kind of like that prime period of time. Like, the Freddy franchise was in full swing. The Jason franchise was kind of, wrapping up at that time, at least the original. And Michael Myers was back in the, Part 4 and Part 5, which, we hadn't seen him since the early 80s with Halloween 2. So yeah, the late 80s was a great time in horror. We always talk about like doing like a double feature. What would you do? I think I would do Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2 and Deadly Friend. I think that would be a pretty cool double feature.
Deadly Friend. It's another good one that we were introduced via this show and then kind of like, that's a cool movie.
It is a good movie. It's a really good movie. Yeah, this one, Prom Night 2, it's, this will remain a classic in my opinion.
So I will say with this one, this is by far, I would say this is definitely a beer and popcorn movie. A high-end one for sure. But this is definitely an enjoyable flick to sit back and watch. But at the same time, this one also has a horror host feel to it, to where, you could have Svengoolie coming in every 15, 20 minutes and breaking it up a little bit and would make it, just as enjoyable. Or just watch it with a cup of coffee at 8 o'clock in the morning and you'll be fine. So I am going to say that I give this one a thumbs up for sure.
I agree with you totally. I have to totally go with the thumbs up. Just for its classic, for nostalgia for me is for sure. But yeah, this is one of those films. It's you got to see it if you're looking for a late 80s horror film. This really kind of captures that, the fantasy horror, the post Nightmare on Elm Street horror, that and even kind of Deadly Friend falls into that category as well. But yeah, Hello, Mary Lou, you gotta check it out.